Okay.
Aloha, everyone, and welcome to the second Hawaii Defense Alliance workshop. Today, we're setting off a series of webinars focused on workforce development. My name is Jason Chung, and I'm pleased to serve as your moderator for this webinar. Thank you for all joining us today, and I hope that you'll be able to attend the whole series that will follow. Next slide, please. Just as a reminder, the Hawaii Defense Alliance mission is to support a more robust defense sector in Hawaii. So what does that mean? It means that we want more of our small and medium-sized businesses engaged, more workforce opportunities in the defense sector for the Hawaii people. As more defense work heads to Hawaii, the Alliance seeks to connect the dots and capture an increasing share in and for the benefit of the Hawaii economy. Today, our webinar is on workforce development and building Hawaii intel career paths together. The goal is to enhance the region's economic stability and prosperity by focusing on people. How do we keep the local talent here in Hawaii and provide expanded opportunities in a number of sectors, from the traditional shipbuilding and military construction and repair to emerging, which we are focused on today, which is cyber, data science, and intelligence. Next slide, please. So we've got a great panel today to really provide the contextual understanding for this series of webinars. I'd like our panel members to introduce themselves and provide a brief overview of their perspective on engagement and opportunities. First, I'd like to turn it over to Rear Admiral Michael Studeman. Sir, over to you.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thanks for participating in this webinar here. Thanks to the Hawaii Defense Alliance and to Jason for moderating this. Looking forward to some questions in the end. Just my perspective up front. I am a Director of Intelligence, a J2 at Indo-Pacific Command. I've been in the position for about 25 months. I have hundreds of people working for me doing very valuable, incredible work for national security. And we're the largest, actually, directorate in Indo-PACOM. And it tells you essentially how important intelligence is to the leadership out here and what we do for the nation and defense intelligence in general. And we have, I would tell you, just a lot going on. And when we talk about federal jobs in this part of the world, I will tell you that the spotlight is moving around and will shine very brightly on everything to do with this particular region. This is the time to really consider what you'll contribute to as a citizen, as somebody with a variety of different talents to offer here in the national security business, because the strongest nations on the planet happen to be in or touching on the Indo-Pacific area. You think United States, think China, think India, Russia, Japan, Korea, others. But the security environment is actually becoming more tense, and stability and prosperity is at stake if we don't find a way to prevent and deter and manage. All of these reasons make work and life in the Indo-Pacific all the more important for the strategic outcome of the 21st century. So just I'll wrap it up there by saying you can't go far wrong by looking for a job out here, and there'll be plenty of openings here within defense and in particular within intelligence as we move forward. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Admiral. Tim, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. Thanks to the Hawaii Defense Alliance. Hey, I just flew into DC, so if I'm a little rough, I just got off the plane. But thanks for inviting me, and I appreciate you hosting these. These are very important. I am basically an intelligence advisor to the USAPAC commander, but really what I spend most of my time in is future capabilities and requirements for the command. And just to give you an example, I just flew in from Colorado this morning and spent time with going over cyber and space, were two of our focus areas. And so when you look at kind of where we're going in the 21st century and where we're going and why, we're going in these very technical fields against very technical savvy adversaries. And that's where we've got to be able to develop, not only hire that talent, but you got to be able to develop that talent. And so we are operating and we will soon open the Hawaii Pacific Innovation Center along with the Pacific Exploitation Dissemination Center here in Hawaii. And so that's a lot of jobs that are going to be available in those technical fields: geospatial, SIGINT, cyber, IT, even your cultural and language skills. And so being able to recruit those talents through traditional, which would be kind of the university system, since we have the president of the University of Hawaii, and then your non-traditional, which is how you can hire them through, spouses that are here, people that are transitioning from the military that stay in Hawaii, and being able to reach out to our high schools and start getting people at a young age to be interested in the mathematics and science areas. That's all. Thanks.
Hey, thanks, Tim, for that perspective. David, over to you.
Thanks. Thanks again, Jason and the Alliance. So I'm here as president of the university, which is the sole provider of public higher education in the state, including our 7 community colleges across the islands, up to UH Manoa, our world-class research university. But in addition to being an educational institution that supports workforce development, UH is also a huge employer of these activities. We do my background was serving as the first Chief Information Officer for UH and VP for IT. So I've suffered through needing to hire good people in IT, in cyber, to support data science areas. And we also do about $480 million a year in extramural funding, including large programs like the Maui High Performance Computing Center, the Pacific Disaster Center. So we're sort of on both sides of this in terms of always looking to hire and always looking to generate. And the areas we're talking about today are obviously high opportunity for us, and also high opportunity for employers. So I'm looking forward to the discussion on how to get it right.
Great. Thank you, David. Ed, over to you.
Hey, everyone. Just want to say thanks again to Jason and HDA for hosting this session and inviting me to be a part of it. Really excited to the conversation. My name is Ed Barnabas. I work for Booz Allen Hamilton. I am actually a principal director who runs our technology and innovation business here in the Pacific. That includes up to 500 people that span Singapore, Guam, Korea, Japan, Alaska, and here in Hawaii, with the largest portion of the workforce being in Hawaii. I mean, we support all the services here and have a very diverse portfolio in terms of what we do. And I lead up our strategic innovation group. And so that touches upon all sorts of things that was just mentioned, right? Anywhere from AI to machine learning to cyber to modern infrastructure. All of that really, I think, is what the crux of what we're supporting the DoD partners in, which is an arms race for technology, right? And so the fight is going to be how fast we can keep up with the adversary and how fast we can learn to innovate and to deploy forward-leaning solutions in a way that helps the warfighter and to keep a free and open Indo-Pacific. And so my perspective is, I'm passionate about a few things. The first thing is I'm passionate about the mission that we do for the DoD. When I was younger, I told some friends that my first job was to research Gulf War illness. And I think at that time, I was a 22-year-old sitting in a room with an 04, 05, and 06, and probably was not the culture I was ready for coming out of college. But now that I'm older and have been supporting the DoD for a long time, the mission deeply resonates with me, and it really gives me purpose to what I do. The second thing to do is I'm passionate about technology and innovation. I'm a curious person by nature. I love to see how technology influences not only our daily life, but how we can solve things. The third thing I care about is really Hawaii, and not just Hawaii, but it's imperative that we feel that we must care and engage within the communities that we work, right? We're surrounded by not just our clients, right? That's a very narrow view, but we're surrounded by people that we live with and that we work with and our kids go to school with. And so I think it's important not to disassociate those two, right? To me, they're connected. The fourth thing is I just love working with kids, right? It may be down to the grade school level, it could be up at university, because they are our future workforce. And so I think when you kind of connect all of these things together, they all have a direct impact, not only for the mission, but for Hawaii and its workforce and the economy, and that it can thrive. And so economic success and advancements in technology have so many obvious positives. But going back to what we talked about before, is that it is also a key component to deterrence and ensuring, again, that we do have a free and open Indo-Pacific. And so really excited about the conversation, see how we can move these things forward. And again, I thank you for inviting me to be part of the panel.
Great, thanks, Ed. Miguel?
Good morning, everybody. Miguel Martinez here from Parsons, and thanks for having me back to another Hawaii Defense Alliance event. I'm excited to be here and discuss our efforts on an island. And for those of you that may be unfamiliar with Parsons, we're a leading disruptive technology provider in the global defense, intelligence, and critical infrastructure markets. And most people here on island are already familiar with the engineering and construction side of the business, which has a long, rich history here. But I'm from the defense and intelligence side of the company that has a more recent history here on island, though we are quickly growing and integrating into the local economy. So in my role at Parsons, I lead a portfolio of cyber intelligence and space programs for Parsons, including two very large multi-year programs that are focused right here in Hawaii and the greater Pacific region. These efforts have allowed me over the last couple of years, but really in a more concerted effort over the last several months, to meet and collaborate with not only our defense customers here on island, but local small businesses and the university as well, which is still emerging, and I'm looking forward to mature even further. Lastly, I've been living in the Washington, D.C. area for the past 15 years, but I just relocated to Oahu last month with my family and starting our new journey here on island, which we're immensely looking forward to.
Awesome, thank you, Miguel. Next slide, please. So I'd like to do is kind of sum up some of the themes that were just presented by our esteemed panel members. And the one thing that I take away from it is obviously the strategic importance of Hawaii, a race for technology as we look at our potential adversaries and competitors in the region now. But that also then presents us a tremendous opportunity. And what really that strategic importance, as being the most consequential region in the world today, in this race for technology, it's really about readiness. I mean, if you go back to Pearl Harbor back in the 1900s, when it first was established, and very soon after, they realized that the only way they could effectively build out Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard was to actually grow some of the trades here locally, right? So there is a direct impact to the readiness of a force and to our national security. And it's great that we've got all now the key stakeholders here that can that can kind of talk about how do we get after this workforce development and develop something very similar to the Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard Apprenticeship Program, which is very effective, but apply it now to this emerging fields that we see within cyber, IT, and data science. So as I stated up front, this is the first, really the foundational webinar that we're going to do. And then you can see how we build very specifically into 4 follow-ons that talk about specific examples of it. You know, right after this, or the next one that we'll do will be University of Hawaii and Indo-PACOM talking about the mentoring initiative that they're doing, which is a great program and pilot program to actually develop folks who can then come out of the university system and then go and work for Indo-PACOM or one of the other intelligence directorates. Then talk about signals intelligence and geospatial, and then all source intelligence, as Tim was talking about, in terms of greater humanities, linguistics, etc. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry, that's it. Slides off. So with that as the background context, first question really is to get at the demand side of this. So I would like to talk, Admiral Sideman, you to kind of start off with from an Indo-PACOM perspective, having the largest directorate there in Indo-PACOM, and talk about kind of your perspective on, you know, what is that demand for today and looking out into the future.
Yeah, thanks. When we take a look at ideal candidates to come into federal jobs here, and in particular the intelligence field, we are looking for those that have some technical skills or regional skills, language skills, and the variety of jobs that we have that could be ones that you would apply for could emphasize any one of those across sort of this wide set of different things that we think can be developed through some of the education at the foundational level, maybe some internships that we have opportunities for here in Defense Intelligence Agency, where you can actually do a summer internship. And when we think about playing it smart, oftentimes somebody who wants to take a look and get a glimpse on the inside is somebody who applies early, has some insights based on relationships, and in some cases some coaching and mentoring from folks on the federal side that already have their jobs. And we're trying to open up channels of communication for that kind of insight to be shared, particularly with some of our younger generation that are working their way up and struggling with this idea: what do I want to do with my life, with my time? Where do I want to do that? How do I balance, work life? And so getting a glimpse of what actually goes down and how we do business here can be worked through some of the courses that we're now doing together with the University of Hawaii, the internships that I talked about that can have you employed just for a summer. You can say, I like this or I don't like this. And the beauty of the internships actually is that you can get your clearance started and worked. And so that's taken care of by the time you want to apply maybe for a more full-time position, starting out. And so there's a smart way to do this, but I would say it all kind of starts with getting the information and getting a sense for what this path looks like in the national security business. So anyway, I just offer a few ideas of that way.
No, thank you for that, sir. I mean, it's really about basically being able to have that roadmap out for folks. So when they look at it, they can see, hey, there's paths for me to do, and there's opportunities in these different areas, and then kind of follow that. Tim, your perspective?
Yeah, no, very interesting comments. And so I think everybody's kind of hit on it, and so did Dr. Lassner too, is, we're really trying to recruit things that aren't clearly defined, or in the government service, I represent the United States Army, not really defined as well as we'd like as far as workforce. We tend to have generalities and we hire generalists, and that will not work in a lot of cases of what we're facing. So when you kind of scope some of the problems, I'll give you, so since 2012, the data science field has grown 650%. My son's an engineer major right now, and I'm trying to tell him to be a data scientist, because that is the future. And but that's a national problem too, because these skills that all of us on this call, we need these. So we look at it this way: it has to be a multi-pronged approach, and we're really looking at kind of the whole community piece. And how do we start out even younger? How do you get people excited? I mean, USHPAC alone, I've got just in jobs alone for geospatial and data visualization and data scientists, you know, I'm going to hire at least 30% more in these fields by 2024. And that's a heavy recruit. Not everybody's going to get on an airplane and come to Hawaii. I mean, but I sure try to convince them with palm trees and the weather, as I sit in hot, sticky DC right now. But that's kind of what we're looking at. For us total by 2025, I've got about a 500 person growth in the workforce. These are high-tech skills. These are IT, cyber, signals intelligence, geospatial, data science, people that can manipulate data. Because I briefed the chief of staff of the Army, and he told me one thing: you're in the data business, not the intel business. Because we do have too much data. I think everybody agrees we have too much data every day. It's a matter of getting it through, and our compute power is there. But now now the human interface with that compute power, that's where the next knowledge level has to go. I listen to people talk about artificial intelligence. It's not artificial intelligence. We've got to get the human up to the machine capability that we have now and what we can do. And then the other thing too is we're doing the analysis on the workforce development for USHPAC of how we can partner with universities, how we can partner with the different systems. I know Admiral Studeman and DIA, and they have very good internship programs in which they get these young college personnel into their formations. And that's kind of where we've got to look at not only recruiting and getting people into, as we say, kind of the butts and seats, but we really need to look at how do we start developing that person into that high school to get programs, reach out. And that's the partnership that we're looking at, where we can reach into those and get those young kids, because they're very technical savvy. I have 3 kids, and they whoop my tail on a lot of things. And I was a pretty good Fortran, Pascal kind of computer programming guy once upon a time, but those days have all passed. Those are old. And so how do we get, they have those skills, but I think it's kind of as Jason's thing for shipyard. We built a good tech program for shipbuilding, but now it's those skills that I think the universities are seeking in their programs, and those kind of students. Admiral Studeman needs them as well. Ed needs them. And I know Miguel, we all are searching for those things, but they really kind of start to form those brains in the middle and in secondary school level. And that's kind of where we've got to look at how do we reach down into those, not just hire the today, but build benches for tomorrow. And I think Hawaii in their education program, my kids are all graduates of the Hawaii public school system. So I'm very proud of what they've gone on to do in their careers. And so there is an appetite, and there's a supply of people. I think it's just that encouragement that we all have to do for them. Thank you.
Yeah, Tim, well said. And I think it's an interesting point, when Admiral Studeman in his opening comments talked about, right, the largest directorate within Indo-PACOM. The USHPAC G2 is also the largest directorate within USARN Pacific, and it's going to grow by about 500 more positions. So a significant requirement in terms of demand there. And that demand, is both of you have talked about, is very, very broad. And in some cases, there's areas that we just maybe don't know yet that are going to develop because of the advance of technology, et cetera. So now as we transition from kind of that demand and that requirement, let's talk about some of the core concerns. There's skills, networks, collaboration, they all play a part in how we kind of all put the workforce development programs together and be effective. And what I'd like to go to first is Dr. Lasner, to you to kind of get your perspective on, what do you think are some of those core concerns that we should be concerned about?
I think, well, first, Tim, thanks for making me think about Pascal for the first time in about 30 years. I think sessions like this and other activities where we engage together to understand perspectives are really important. That it's very easy for employers to grouse about the inability to find qualified people for their jobs, and it's very easy for universities to go along our pathway. And we've just got to make the effort to come together around shared perspectives. We also, I think, have to separate a little bit the specific skills that people need from the core competencies. And I'd say something like data science is a core competency and understanding of data. In one of my conversations with a bank president about workforce, just said, I don't care if they understand business and finance. If they understand data, I can teach them business and finance. And I think that's true in most disciplines if we can educate people. Some of the areas that have already come up, understanding of the region, understanding of language, which is essential to understand culture in a region. Those are all things that are part of the context for developing a workforce that's able to do intelligence work in this region. And those are things that we take very seriously. And I know it's a lot of the work that we've been doing with Indo-PACOM has been around bringing in people from the university who don't normally engage with the defense establishment, but who are now starting to understand that the things they've been doing for decades are of really important interest to Indo-PACOM and to other employers who work in the region. And we structure a lot of this around an MOU that goes back probably, I want to say about 10 years, and we've refreshed it 3 times between UH and PACOM, now Indo-PACOM. Most recently, we did a refresh with Admiral Davidson in April, just before he left. And that's really focused around areas like resilience and climate change, technology experimentation and innovation, including in these very specific areas that we're talking about today. And the third of 3 areas is around education and workforce development in international studies, intelligence, future studies. And I think when we break ourselves out of the bonds of just training people for a specific job, but really provide people those broad-based educational skills, and if we can identify those together, we're going to be a lot more successful together.
No, thank you for that. That makes a lot of sense and really kind of builds upon what has already been, discussed. Miguel, your thoughts on some of the core challenges, core concerns?
Sure thing, Jason. So great points by Mr. Lassner there, and I'll add to that. That we have to develop, the pipeline of talent, but we also have to make sure that we capture those candidates once they make it through the development pipeline, and to make sure that that we're building for the long-term success of workforce development. We do have to focus on STEM, so that continues to be a high growth and high demand area. So government and industry are supporting, are competing here aggressively against every other industry to capture this talent pool. So I think that one of the workforce concerns that limits our talent pool is actually a key discriminator for us in attracting these candidates at the same time. And so that's the need for clearances for much of our work, just as Admiral Studeman touched on a moment ago. And so that's an area where I think the team on this panel can collaborate to get those young professionals into the clearance process and offer them a chance to do some impactful, rewarding work that the others frankly can't offer. So this is that purpose that Ed mentioned in his opening comments. So I think we can continue to focus on STEM, but also find the areas that set us apart to be more successful and be more competitive as we fight for talent with all the other folks looking for the same people.
No, great comments. Thanks, Miguel. Ed, over to you.
Hey, thanks. And Tim, I was going to say, if your son needs a job, whether he's an engineer or data scientist, tell him to hit me up. But the reason I say that is I think one of the core challenges really is, we've talked a lot of big terms, right? We talked about data science, we talked about cyber. I think what we have to do is actually clarify and demystify what those things are, right? If you're a student, whether at the high school age or college, or you're even someone who's looking for a pivot in your career, or you're trying to get a new job, when you say, I want a data scientist, me being in the technology delivery industry knows that could be many things, right? There is a data life cycle that requires a multitude of different skill sets from engineering, right? In order to have an analytic, you need to have an engineering, you need to have ETLs, you need to have backend development, you need to have a platform, you need to ingest data, you need to process it. You have to do about 10 things before you can even say, I'm going to now make a decision based on the data that I found, right? That takes a ton of different skill sets. And I think what that does is, if you're very open and plain language about what it is that we need, it very much explains to a future workforce, I can see myself in different ways, right? I don't have to be a data scientist. I could be a cloud engineer, right? I could be a UI UX person that does customer experience, right? I could be the requirements person who translates mission problems and use cases to the technology team. All of those skill sets are needed to get just one solution out the door. So I think a big portion of it is being more clear about what it means that we want, right? And breaking it down for people to digest so that it opens up the aperture for the workforce. That's one. I think the second thing I had was, Dr. Lasner said, is that we need more of this, right? Exposure is super important, right? Exposure to different industries, different people, very much understanding the problem sets of the DoD, doing industry to industry conversation, having more conversations between students and industry. All of that leads to, I think, more tangible and meaningful engagement, right? And it's just more learning, right? And then it puts people along that path of seeing themselves in that workforce. And I think the last thing too, and I think, I don't want to speak for Miguel, right, is that one thing that I thought about is thinking about the panel is that sometimes people have the problem of being familiar with the folks they always work with, right? We always have to be cognizant of bringing new people to the table. For example, we're a large provider. We're one of the largest defense providers. Our clients rely on us a lot, but we're not the ones with all the answers. And this is where I think it goes into the collaboration with the small business and mid businesses, is that we have to be mindful about bringing other people to the table to partake in the conversation, because only then will you have diversity of thought, better solutions, and we're providing opportunities, I think, to other small businesses and probably they're bringing something to the table that we would not have thought of. So I think it's important to say, not only do we have these forums in which we can collaborate, but do we have diversity in participants, and are we inviting new people to the table? And so I think that's pretty essential moving forward, especially since a lot of what we're doing and what we had in the last HDA event was, how do we bring in some of the small businesses on island, is that we need to bring them to the table and participate in the conversation, and not to feel like they're bystanders and waiting for someone to give them an opportunity. So I think that's a big one too.
Hey, can I just comment on Ed's, just riff a little bit, because I think he said some very important things. I agree with everything everyone's saying here. Sometimes when we talk about skill sets, it can be confusing. And sometimes you want to rush to give me the job description here. But I would tell you that a common theme in the 21st century is just going to be people who can figure out how to, sense make. And making sense of things can be had through technical, machine assisted, human analysis, all the above. And that's what most companies do. If you look at an underlying theme, what is the most value to a company or an organization? Do I have people that actually have enough experience and enough skills to be able to make sense of this particular area to advise me on the best path ahead? How do I be the best informed to make the right choices? And when it comes to many of our decisions, we want to get it as much to the left of the decision with clarity as we can, and not wait to be completely reactive. And so being proactive and ahead of the game and looking around corners is the real trick when we want to buy time and be able to maneuver and make decisions whether or not they're business or they're, part of military decision making. And this is the core thing. At the end of the day is, how can you contribute to that, story finding, storytelling, and where can you fit in with that? And there are a lot of ways. Essentially, there are many roads that make their way to Rome in this regard. And I would just say, in the national security business, we take a look at this and go, the way wars start is through misunderstanding and miscalculation. Most of them start that way. And so how do we, on our side at least, make sure that we can have a sense of understanding that is so deep that we don't do that miscalculation and we can prevent perhaps others from miscalculating? That, in a sense, is becoming a more and more valuable commodity, because we can't allow the Indo-Pacific to result in the same kind of rage of war that we saw in World War II or even a Korean or Vietnam War. Those are the things that we are on a noble cause to prevent as we think about stability, prosperity here in the decades to come. So anyway, just wanted to throw in a little bit on those comments. Thanks.
No, that's a great way to really tie it all together. As Ed was talking, I was writing this note, the supply chain of data, and data delivery, right? But it all leads really to what you just laid out, Admiral. It's the decision space and decision advantage that ultimately that we want to provide with this, right? And as you take that entire supply chain all the way, and that includes things as visualization and processing, et cetera. There's so many components of it that we need to clearly kind of articulate, because there's a lot of places where a lot of talented people could fit into that supply chain of data delivery and decision advantage. So that was a great way that both of you tied all that together, and actually segue to kind of the next question. So when you look at that, to be able to do that, it's going to take a lot of partnerships and collaboration with different organizations, right? Private, public partnerships, et cetera, / collaboration. So I'd like to kind of get the panel's thoughts on that. And I'd like to start with Dr. Lassner, with you on kind of the private public relationships collaboration.
Yeah, and I throw into that, even when we work with Indo-PACOM or DoD or that kind of a partner, it's almost like a public-private, because we're separate organizations. I think complicated partnerships are complicated. I think understanding of where both the benefit points and the pain points are for your partner are really important, and that helps understand when you're going into a partnership, are you ultimately going to succeed? For example, if we're trying to partner with someone around workforce development, and it turns out they're really looking for free labor for a project, that's probably not going to work for us. Whereas if we come together and it's about how are we going to educate people who are going to fill a job, students always want, how do I say this? Free internships are not all that popular anymore with students who are struggling to live. But if we understand, we're trying to create opportunities that will result in something in the future rather than something that's just very present focused, that will really help. In some of these areas that we're talking about, there are skill sets that are equally applicable in the public and private sector and in the intel community, but also in finance, in healthcare, in insurance, in almost any kind of sector where they need those same capabilities, that same kind of sense making, the same ability to communicate, collaborate with others as well. And I think when we do it together and we get it right, it can be pretty amazing. So we do some work, we call them sector convenings, where we work with like the healthcare sector. And we try to understand what are your workforce needs as a sector rather than individually with each hospital as an employer. And we find that when we get people together in the sector, we did the same thing with banking. We're about to start one with IT. that they also can communicate with each other at the same time they're communicating with us as the ostensible provider of workforce for individual employers. And that has worked out really well as a strategy for us. The last thing I'll say maybe about pipelines, and I agree with the comments that we have to think about the pipelines. And in many ways, all of these technical areas start with getting kids interested in STEM. A lot of times, by the time they're in college, it may be too late. And I just want to highlight something that NSA did, I think about 3 or 4 commanders ago, Captain Bean, and he made workforce his priority. And he was a Pied Piper of STEM and cyber. And he found resources within NSA, and he actually funded UH to run these Gen Cyber programs. And if you're not familiar, you can Google. And we've been among the most successful states in the country now in doing these Gen Cyber workshops all the way down to middle schools and high schools to really begin to get kids interested in STEM, particularly technology. And some of them will end up in cyber, but a lot of them will go off into other kinds of STEM careers. And I think when we do those kinds of things together to create the pipelines, we can flow them from those K-12 grades into higher education programs at our community colleges, at the private universities here at UH Manoa, and we can take them up as far as they need to go in the pipeline. But there are great entry-level jobs that do not even require a full college degree, a full bachelor's degree. And those can get people started earning money while they continue on their educational pathways and their job pathways.
No, thank you, David, for that. You're right. I think Tim had mentioned about that too, about getting early on, right? And the sooner we can kind of start to chart that pathway for folks, they can recognize it, right? And then there's all these different opportunities along the path where you don't have to be the traditional, get your master's degree from like Georgetown University to then go work at DIA. There's all these different opportunities that can present themselves if we do it the right way and kind of define those different requirements. Tim, I'd like to go over to you now to see kind of your perspective on, kind of the partnership piece.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I think, we really look at, I'll give you, so we're starting the Hawaii Pacific Innovation Campus. And just to start off, you talk about partnerships from the beginning. Try telling someone in Hawaii that you need 50,000 square feet of space, and you need a place to put Intel folks, and you need a place to test equipment, and you need a place that's a large feat. So right off the bat, we had to do a lot of partnership with the state, just grounded right there. Then you've got to start bringing in who has some of the company and talent that you can bring in that will start some of these partnerships. And, example was Descartes Lab. We brought them in, and they sponsored through Chaminade the data science, because their high speed compute, we grabbed, one person. I'll give you an example. One person who just got out of the Army, and one person who's just a good Hawaii kid who's like, I'm getting my education, but I'm never leaving Hawaii. I love my family too much. I'm staying here, which is a noble cause, and family is the most important thing. So, he's all in, and we've grabbed some of these folks through Dr. Peck at the Chaminade to do data science and working with one of these companies. Another example is we're doing the 5G test through the 912 Institute, and we're doing it through Purdue University. And so between Hawaii and Indiana, we're doing 5G testing, which is important for us to have that kind of high capacity communications. For us, we have to encrypt the communications, but it's also the side benefit is working with the state technology personnel, because we're in a very Kaka'ako, in Kapalama, if you've ever been down there, you probably wouldn't walk through those areas 8 years ago, but they're building up in their underserved areas for IT. So we're doing testing, and we're doing coordination with another university, but there's a side benefit of the public housing area. that's not too far from there. So there's partnerships that we're even doing with the state. We brought the Speaker of the state, who that's his district, so to kind of partner with him as well, so we could expand out and let them see. And then the other piece is we're bringing in the students, as Dr. Lassman talked about, that they're just going to UH. They just need a side job, side gig to do work and to get those skills. And as we all talked about, it's skills and then being able to get them into the clearance process while they're going to the University of Hawaii or Chaminade or HPU, and then be able to, then they see a pathway to a job, which I know presidents of universities love to show how many people they put into the workforce is a metric besides degrees, and that's real important. And so that partnership, sometimes it is a partnership of convenience, sometimes it's messy, it's not clean, but we've been able to work through a lot of these things and not only get the use, HECO, even partnership with them on, electricity is a thing and backup generation is a thing. And so there was a lot of those partnerships ensuring that we weren't just the only entity that was using the property. And that kind of partnerships, what we're looking at. We are doing a lot of events. We did one at the Sandbox here in July. We've got one, I don't know, Jason, if you want to, one coming up here end of November, December. And these things of getting people like myself, Dr. K has been involved in this, is meeting those companies and starting to form those things and listen to their ideas, because the one thing we do poorly sometimes in the government is listen to outside ideas. And those partnerships are invaluable to bring the talent and ideas of what we can do to really push ourselves into the future, which is where we have that advantage. And as the Admiral said, be sure that we have an advantage and we always have the best decision advantage at any given time so we don't make critical mistakes. Thanks.
No, thanks, Tim, for saying that. And you're right. I think there's a number of initiatives, right? The Navy has Tech Bridge, which is supposed to try to facilitate some of that. And the Air Force also, out of Joint Base Air, has a similar program. For some reason, I think it's something Spark that's supposed to do something very similar in terms of bringing together academia, industry, and the government to really kind of do that. What I want to do now is, because I think each one of you have such great perspective on this, so we've got about 10 minutes left, is really turn it back over to you to kind of last 1 to 2 minutes, kind of closing comments per se, closing perspective in terms of, this opportunity that presents herself, right? I think we talked a lot about how early on we've got to get this integrated into our education system. We've got to build a pathway for folks so they can kind of see it. And we have to define that so they understand that it's a long supply chain that gets after what we're going after here. It's very complex, but it's an incredible opportunity. And there are definitely a lot of opportunities here in Hawaii and a lot of key players that are involved in it and to an extent represented here on this panel. So what I'd like to do first is Ed, to go over to you for a quick 1 to 2 minute kind of overview / closing comments on this, and then I'll go through the rest of the panel. Ed, let's start with you.
Sure, yeah. I think we covered a lot today. I think 2 thoughts that came to mind in terms of how to tackle some of the barriers we have to move forward this is, I think a lot of it is also around infrastructure, right? When I talk to clients about what they want, I've said this before, but if I go back 5 to 10 years, you would have to educate people on what AI was or the value of what some of these technologies are. If I walk into anybody's room, you're not going to have to sell them on why you need these things, right? Why it's important for the mission, or why it's important for their business, or why it's important for more efficiencies. But really, what they're fascinated is the end, the shiny thing at the end. But there are so many foundational things that have to happen. And when people think about the foundational building blocks that you need to do, it fosters more collaboration, because now you're working with like-to-like infrastructures. You can do greater collaboration with universities. You can do greater collaboration with niche companies that are doing commercial type of solutions that you can bring into the secure space. But unless you have something that has bandwidth, security, automation, compute power, flexible storage, open architectures, it's very now hard to integrate anything forward leaning into a stack or an environment that's very legacy kind of held back. And so I think one thing is to think about not just technology in terms of the endpoint, but how do we invest in actual infrastructure and actual things where people can co-develop and they can actually bring in solutions that are on the cutting edge and then translate that to the mission space. So I think infrastructure is a big thing. And I think the second thing is what Admiral said earlier too is, or touching upon it, is fundamentally people have to think about the work differently, right? If you say that you were getting after an Intel problem, you would say, give me 10 Intel analysts. The answer today may be, give me 4 Intel analysts, 2 backend data engineers, 2 data scientists, and a geospatial engineer, right? Or a specialist. How you get after problems have to fundamentally change in terms of the people you bring to the problem. And I think how we buy services, how we as Booz Allen would provide the right talent, all that people have to evolve in terms of how they're thinking about it and how they actually procure services, how they get after the problem, and how they collaborate. So there has to be some change in terms of culture. There has to be some change in org design. All that goes hand in hand with the technology. And so there are some fundamental things that cross over to the business side that have to marry how we're actually going to incorporate some of the technology side. And all that lends to opening up the pipeline to bring in folks to do the work, right? But unless you tackle those two kind of foundational things, which is culture, infrastructure, and probably how we procure services, it'd be very hard now to bring in all these folks that we spent all this time creating a pipeline for, and they're ready to do it. And then what happens is they leave the island, all right? And that's fundamentally what we don't want them to do. We want them to stay here, stay with their families, make a great wage, and to do important work. And so I think those are the two things that I wanted to mention because we didn't necessarily touch on it before. So.
No, thanks, Ed, for that. Admiral, over to you.
Yeah, thanks again for the opportunity here. I just want to reiterate that we deal in an ever complex world. And so this diversity of skill sets and thought, people with different backgrounds are going to become ever more critical to the developing global situation. And it sounds like it's maybe too atmospheric here, but I want to bring it down to our level. I mean, at the end of the day, the international system is under duress. Democracy is under duress. And we have a responsibility, an obligation to put forward our best talent against our hardest problems. And we have some really knotty ones that we face today and will going forward. And there are no easy solutions. In fact, you could say many of them are not solvable. We're in an infinite game where we have to manage these the best possible way. And it's going to take a lot of talented people to help us think through and then devise and formulate the best strategies to be able to encounter this complex world and shape it to the best of our ability that advantages freedom and our values, our security, and those of our partners and allies. And it's not guaranteed. There are other powers that are growing that have a different view of the world and how it should be run and what the international system should be. And so we are looking at something that has shades of the magnitude of the problem we faced in the 20th century with the Soviet Union. And so I just want to reiterate that peace and tranquility is what we all look for, but it ain't preordained, and we're going to have to work hard for it. And the people that we have on this island who can contribute to it, I think, are going to really shape the future. And so looking forward to encouraging their participation in guiding the country forward and navigating well. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Admiral. I mean, you definitely describe what's in front of us, which is this wicked problem set that we're going to have to really be very creative in getting after. Dr. Lassner, over to you.
Sure, just a couple points. We're all in really complicated organizations, and in general, nobody outside them really understands them. And sometimes even the people inside them don't really understand them. But the expertise and talent and skills don't necessarily reside in the place, in the box that has the name that you might think, because the things that we're talking about are really pervasive requirements throughout our organizations. So everybody who knows cybersecurity doesn't live in a box called cybersecurity anymore. And I think part of our challenge, and this is a panel of leaders, is to help figure out how to get our best talent, regardless of where it resides, connected with others outside our organizations that may be able to recognize and apply those talents to problems and opportunities of mutual benefit. And one of the ways I'm really convinced we have to do this, because our cultures are so different. If you just look at universities, Defense Department, contractor corporations, we have to spend more time together, and not just us, but we've got to bring together, and it's been said several times, diverse groups from within our organizations in less formal ways, and just have people sitting together and talking with each other and teasing out ideas and coming up with solutions that probably none of us would have imagined on our own.
No, thank you for that. You're exactly right. Creativity, innovation, right? Spraying critical thought is what we need. Miguel?
Yeah, Jason, so if I had to summarize, then I think that Dr. Lassner nailed it in saying that we have to start in the K through 12 years, really long before he ever gets a hold of them at UH. And we have to make it attractive for these same kids that are graduating to stay on island after we've developed them. So one way we have started to tackle this is by taking steps towards creating a local internship program that will provide opportunities to graduating students on the industry side as well, which will complement those efforts that are already in place by the government. So Parsons has already supported this through a teammate on one of our local programs where we've been able to bring on some interns, and we're establishing a broader internship program as well. I've met with a few of the university officials already, and look forward to meeting with them again, really ironing this out, getting the requirements from the government side so that we can make sure that these kids that are coming out have the right skills. So and yes, from my perspective, just look forward to getting after it.
No, thanks. You're exactly right, Gil. I mean, there's a lot of programs that already exist out there that, quite honestly, if we can be very complimentary to them and connect the dots and add where we have to add, we can have a tremendous success. So thank you for that. Tim?
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, I agree with you, Dr. Lassner, on the outreach, and just kind of, I think I learned a lot when we had a social gathering of technologists down at the Sandbox. Some of your folks, some of your leaders there at the university were there as well. And it was just amazing, the collaboration and learning that happened right there. And it is feeding some of these programs that we're looking at in the future collaboration. So I second your comments, and they are so true. The other piece too is that research collaboration too, to get in, because universities are really good at having the ability to sit, think, and read and reflect. Sometimes organizations that are on a fast moving wheel tend not to. The Army's a good example. The busyness does creep in and does not lend itself to more collaboration and thinking and researching. And so I would tell you some of the research collaboration that we're doing now with universities here, it goes down to even one of the companies is reaching out to the K level that we talked about, getting those people in that K level at that middle school. Anecdotally, I will tell you, I have an engineer kid because 2 retired aeronautical engineers volunteered at the middle school he was at. And they got him fired up to be an engineer. And 2 are actually at the University of Hawaii in their engineering program from the same middle school, just because of good mentors down there at that middle school level. The other piece is the technology challenges. You heard the Admiral talk about, I mean, we are under duress and threat on the way of life and freedom and open, a world that we live in that really was established after World War II. But the technology challenges from these adversarial groups is not to be it is to be taken seriously, and it is a threat. So that cybersecurity and those technical skills, banking systems, protection of our data, protection of universities' data, private companies is a serious business, and it's being exploited every day. And so those technology challenges are things that everybody in this room today has to fix, and those are challenges upon us, but we got to recruit those people that are going to be able to throw out those threats that every day try to get into our banking systems, everything, our research, still technology that we Americans have copyrighted and stand by. And then the other piece, I think, is how do we develop people in these collaborative environments? I'm a little more age, so it was more of a structured type of Army that I grew up in, and that is not how the newer generation. I'm sure Dr. Lasner sees that in his school, but they are collaborative and very flat, and they don't like structure, but they love to be challenged. And I think for all of us, when we look at workforce development, that is something that you have to do. Most people leave the Army government service within 5 years because number one thing is they're not challenged. And we believe a lot of talent because the younger generation doesn't feel committed to stay for 40 years with the U.S. Army Civil Service. And so we've got to adapt ways to the newer environment and how we can develop them, keep them interested, and flatten these organizations out so they're fired up to come and work for you and stay with you. So thanks for the opportunity to be a part of this esteemed panel.
Well, thanks, Tim, and thank you all, gentlemen. So on behalf of the Hawaii Defense Alliance, excited. Right, there's a significant wicked problem set up. Senior leaders, critical senior leaders that are getting after this problem set. And helping to develop more opportunities here in Hawaii. So again, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time, your effort, your passion, and dedication, and your service. Thank you all. Have a great day. Thank you, everyone.
See you guys. Great seeing you. Thanks again for the opportunity.
Take care.